I'm very well. How are you doing, sir?
I am doing incredible. Dude, I've been looking forward to this conversation for so long. But before we start, how much did we raise?
4.75 million United States dollars. There we go. The gong. Nice. I like the gong. I didn't know about that.
Oh yeah, we had to bring it out. Look, TBPN does a great job. It's good energy. We want some of that for you guys.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
I mean, what a product. Let's be perfectly honest. Give us some context into the stream, for the stream. Give us some context into yourself.
Myself or the product?
Little bit of both. Give me a blend and then we'll dive in. I have so many questions.
I'll give you my background then. So I started coding when I was 9 years old. I started playing Minecraft, and then one thing led to another. You're running servers, running mods. After that, creating video games. And then I was living in Portugal when I was younger for a little while. And then when we moved back to the UK, moving back to Lancashire, I dropped out of high school for, I won't dive into all the reasons why, but I dropped out of high school. I started working for my uncle when I was 13, 14, and then it just sort of went from there. Got my first job at a startup when I was 18. I was working for Zilch, a few more startups from there, and ended up going out to San Francisco in August, meeting Ted and Chris. And almost 1 year ago to the day, maybe a week ago, we started the company in a office in Hayes Valley in San Francisco. Um, and it's been quite the journey since then. In terms of what we're building, the idea is we build websites that think is the way we like to describe it. So the idea is rather than your website being a static, pre-made set of content, maybe it's a bit more sophisticated in how it's built with a content management system, whatnot. However that gets built, our websites are essentially generative UI built by an agent, and that allows us to make it a dynamic and interactive experience. So the agent can take you down different paths. It can give you options for different paths. It can ask you questions. You can ask it questions, and it can build UI around that. And then in a completely hands-off way, we can build many different pages and automatically manage and optimize those pages for people.
Why do we need this?
Why do we need this? Well, there's a lot of problems when building websites. A lot of it's keeping things up to date. It's really hard to write good copy, so you need a lot of different people to do different tasks, whether that's like design, development, etc. And so if you're a product marketer or a growth person and you are, trying to run experiments on the website, or you're trying to run ad campaigns and you're trying to create lots of different landing pages, or you're an early stage startup and you just need something out there, often you just end up going and like picking a template off of Squarespace Framer, all these different, Webflow, whatever. And like that's going to be a very poor experience for users. And second to that, your website is a very one size fits all thing because it's for so many different people. So it is if you're let's take the example of a B2B sort of software startup like us. You're trying to target customers, you're trying to target potential employees, you're trying to target potential or current investors, and there's so many different personas visiting your website that the static experience makes that very hard to cover all the different bases you might want to cover. So the fact that our agents are able to do simple things like just, tailor it to different personas based on what they say and giving them the option to self-identify makes a massive difference to the freshness and the relevance of the content that they're looking at.
I think what is really cool as well, and I'm sure you've already thought about this, is the fact that if there's a single link, you don't have to make multiple pages for campaigns that you're running. You can sort of understand what your users are then clicking on and then searching for, and it gives a whole different meaning to the dynamic of, a Meta ads or TikTok ads as an example, right?
Yeah, it generates a lot more data than it otherwise would because you're getting that interaction. Say you get 1,000 ad clicks, maybe 10 to 50 might book a demo with you. But what do those other 50 to 990 people do? You don't know anything about them. You don't know what they care about. You don't know what objections they have. Because it's such a lighter touch to interact with a website and rather than getting on a call with a person, you're generating all this information about that part of the funnel that you otherwise wouldn't. And yeah, the other part of that is that it makes it a lot easier to manage many different ad campaigns because we can give you one link and we can generate the page based on the ad that was clicked on.
How do you get this agent to work then? Like, does it end up looking like a chatbot that you talk to that in the background is going away thinking based on content that you as the business has given it, and then surfaces that content exactly how the user needs it?
I mean, from a our customer perspective, it's a very simple process. You go through, you can give it your existing website, you can give it documentation, brand assets, etc., and it will bring all that together. And there's a whole load of stuff we do to help users create new brand assets and new product images and things like that on the back end. In terms of the agent itself, I mean, what is an agent ultimately? I mean, people have many different definitions, but to me, an agent is the state and permanence you give an LLM model by calling it multiple times and the outputs that it gives you affecting the next inputs to it. That's like a very high level way of putting it. And so what we do is we give the agent this, or the LLM model this view of the world and these actions it can take. And that view of the world and those actions are the website. And so it's using this dynamic, themable component system that's designed on design best practices, and then we've given it a bunch of knowledge about how to use those correctly. There's all sorts of rules and guidelines in design, whether that's around typography, how to write copy, how components fit together, and we've given it all that information. We've created quite a big rule set around that. And then we give that to the agent, and then we allow it to go through and build the page. And then there's obviously lots more we have to do in terms of allowing it to ask you questions and then taking the input back from that. And there's a lot more to it, but that's sort of the high level.
Long term, what does this end up looking like? Is it just a replacement for a Squarespace website, or is it more than that?
It's a good question. It depends. It depends really because it depends on where the web traffic goes. I mean, we've spoken to people, particularly during the fundraise, we spoke to people with quite strong views as to where the web is going to go. And there's an argument to be made that the vast majority of web traffic is going to come off of Google search and come into things like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, etc., where you're not really going and searching for this information yourself. You have maybe a much higher level question, and you want to your agent goes and gets that for you. That's one way of looking at it. I mean, our view is that long term, companies still need a way to store and present their information, and particularly control how they appear on content services, whether that's regardless of device or medium or channel. And so really we see ourselves long term being in that space as to how companies present themselves on the web and through digital mediums, regardless of whether that's a website or an agent browsing the web or whatever it is. Like, because we can just create it as essentially a new medium for the agent, all of the same things that it learns around messaging and presentation are applicable everywhere.
What's hard about what you're building?
Uh, Many, many things. Getting like in terms of agent building, the two hardest things are getting context and then giving
Why?
that context to an LLM. Well, there's a lot of different things that go into your website. There's images and brand assets and theming. There are things you might want to embed on the page, videos and case studies, interactive elements, etc. We have to gather all of that into the platform. Some of that's structured, some of that's unstructured, some of that comes through integrations, some of that's manually managed. That can be different depending on the kind of company and the size of the company. And we have to make that easy to manage. And so that's like a whole area that I think companies are still figuring out, is how to make these new agentic products easy to use for actual customers. And then we have to take all of that and we have to bundle it up into something that's tight and terse and clear for the agent to then go and build the web page for. There's usually more information available than is necessarily relevant at any given time. So you have to pick and choose what you give to the agent. The models only have so much ability to they can only handle so much information at once, right? And there's this whole concept of context engineering, and that's around how you process all this information and give it to the LLM model. So those are really the two hard bits: is how do you get the information, and then what do you then do with it to give the LLM a good view of the world?
What are you finding good practices are for that? Is there like an easy one shot method, or is it very much sort of massaging the LLM to help you build this out and actually maintain the context?
There's no silver bullet. It's a lot of experimentation. I think everybody you ask who's building in this space is going to give you a different answer.
Okay.
It's not like I wasn't around in the 90s, but I can imagine that there were a lot of tricks people had to do to get things working. As cloud and SaaS and whatnot came around, with the power of computing available at the time, there were lots of things people had to do. But the rising tide of just computing getting better and Moore's law and all these things meant that suddenly all of that was irrelevant. And you're seeing a similar thing in AI where it's very hard and tricky and experimental to build a good product because the playbooks and the engineering thinking and all these different things are still very immature. The tooling is very
It's
immature,
all very nascent right now.
etc. It's all very nascent. And so I think the best way at the moment is experimentation. I mean, everybody talks about evals, but there was a great discussion on X recently where people were talking about the fact that Claude Code, which I would argue is the most successful agent built so far, was built completely without evals, built purely on vibes, so to speak, and they build it based on what feels better to use, and then they use it every day. And so it's a lot of experimentation. It's having a good feedback loop, and a lot of this is downstream of tooling. And this is another thing that I think is going to change a lot with how startups are built. Is historically startups wouldn't make much investment in tooling early on because it was
Hmm.
it would slow you down. Investment takes time to pay off, but I think with AI that leverage is so much higher in the tooling that you're going to see a lot more people building that tooling early on. So we invest a lot in the tooling for the experimentation and feedback loop of building the agent.
Okay, I want to talk about the product. You obviously your mind is incredible when it comes to thinking about, what it is that you're building, this agentic website, essentially for businesses. How do you make it a thoughtful product so that that end user, the customer, myself, going onto the web and looking for information, like actively trying to purchase something as well, is a good experience? More than
I'll
good,
let you know when we figure it
a
out.
wonderful experience. Like, what's the thesis around how you think about it? Because it's not like you're just dragging and dropping chat, right? There's a bit more nuance to it. You got to make it look nice.
Yeah, we've started with how do we replicate the normal web experience as closely as possible, like it was built by professionals, and like I say, all those different roles that are needed. How do we build those experiences, but in a much more hands-off way for the businesses using the product? That's been step one, and
Hmm.
that's been a lot of time thinking through and decomposing like what is a website, how does it get built, what elements matter, how do you write good copy, how do you have a good narrative structure. We've been working with some great people both in we have internally in the team and externally on design thinking and whatnot. And it is very tricky as well with making it flexible to everybody's brands and things like that. So we've been doing a lot of work in that area. I think the next step is going to be how do we take that where we've sort of replicated the normal existing experience, and then what new capabilities does the architecture give us to then branch out into new forms. We see this in the product at the moment with a very simple concept of branching, where the agent is able to give you essentially like a choose your own adventure website. And so it can say, well, is this for individuals? Is this for teams? Is this for enterprise? Is this one we have for a customer? Because those paths of information are very different for them. So that's one thing. We have the ability for it to ask you questions so that it can send you to the right call to action. And we have the thing where you can ask it questions, but we don't know what that necessarily is going to look like. And especially as the model capabilities improve, new things become possible. We started when we were trying to build this initially, we were finding it very hard to get the agent to do all the different things that it needs to do, and then you have to try and decompose it even more because it needs to pick the right elements, it needs to write good copy, it needs to be keeping track of the narrative flow, all these different things. And
Hmm.
then, a new model comes out. This was back in March. It was Gemini 2.5. New model comes out, and suddenly the whole thing just gets a lot easier. I mean, I think we spoke about this when we were, talking to each other about me coming on. I think that has changed certainly in the slope of improvement. So, it remains to be seen what new capabilities we'll get access to.
Are you finding with the models that you're integrating into the product, you're actually slowing down on that rate of innovation and they're not doing the things you thought they would do? Are we hitting that
Um,
scaling problem?
uh, we are and we aren't. Like the traditional scaling curve of pre-training has definitely plateaued. You're not seeing jumps like we saw GPT 3.5 to GPT 4,
It was huge.
and yeah, and
The
huge.
4.1 to
Gemini
4.7
one.
was massive.
Yeah, like there were big jumps from that sort of like start of last year to end of last year. This year that's not continued, but you've been seeing much more in the reasoning models and the post training and the reinforcement learning, and that doesn't necessarily make like the hot path inference that you're doing for your agent that much better, but it does give you other capabilities, like it allows you to build much better judging systems. Which helps you both inline on the actual product, but also out of band with your tooling and whatnot. So you're using an LLM as a judge and a scoring system gets a lot better from that. It allows us to do a lot more around creating synthetic data sets and distilling smaller models and things like that. So from a tooling perspective and a development lifecycle perspective, that's still been on a fast increase. I mean, we'll see with Gemini 3, which is, I've been hearing is going to come out in the next couple of weeks. We'll see where they go with that. Google might pull something out of the bag as they often have before, but they might not.
It's true. I mean, like if we look at the image models, which I assume at long term is what you will integrate into the site to generate imagery, not just copy, or the VO models, they've got considerably better. We're still making those massive jumps. Nano Banana.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's other modalities where that curve is still very steep. I think images is the best example right now. I think video and world models and all those things are a little bit further off, and I think we'll get there. But yeah, with Nano Banana or whatever they've renamed it to, Flash 2.5
Yeah.
image preview 0315, whatever butchered name they gave it. I did tell them off for that. They like that part of the product will get a lot better, and so that's something we're really focused on at the moment is how we improve the whole thing in the product around images, and whether that's taking standalone product images and then placing them in situ into much nicer looking things, how we can how help post process brand images into different sizes, upscaling. There's so many different things to do around that, so that's really what we're going to be focused on over the next couple of months. Is it's very clear that that's the area that's advancing the most. So how do we get that into the product?
I love it. I want to talk a little bit on when it comes to the tooling that you're building out internally. Do you end up having to sort of ride the waves of these models as they come out and sort of figure out what works well, as you've mentioned, and then apply that to the tooling internally? Or long term, do you feel like I'm just going to have to build my own local, like smaller, more fine tuned models that are well placed for what we're building at Architect?
It's definitely the format at the moment. So the approach we take is to initially use the largest, biggest, baddest model we can get our hands on. At the moment that's Gemini 2.5 Pro,
Oh, it's a beast.
GPT-5. And we take
Can I
those,
ask, just before we go
yeah,
on,
go on.
GPT-5, what were the vibes out of that for you? I've heard mixed reviews from a lot of people. Some say great, some say not.
I feel like it's like the Gemini models are really, really good. And when you spend a lot of time going back and forth with these models, you get a sense for how they behave and how they respond.
Hmm.
The Gemini 2.5 family of models are very good at doing what you tell them, but then they're not particularly creative, and they can be very closely influenced by certain things. So, like when we feed product information in, we find that the format that product information takes in the call to build the page ends up influencing the page quite a bit. And so we focus on that area quite a bit because we're very reliant on the Gemini family of models at the moment. With GPT-5, I'd say that's less so, but it's a lot trickier. It's a lot more of a power tool, and I would say there's a lot more knobs on it. So there's the reasoning and the verbosity is now a separate knob you can tune. We haven't had access to do any of the fine tuning or distillation with GPT-5 yet, but my suspicion is the route OpenAI are going down is building a more unified model, making it more powerful, and then building stuff, tooling into their platform that then allows application layer companies like us to do a lot more with it, rather than going down that route of okay, we'll take Llama and we will fine tune Llama and we'll do like loads of crazy like ML stuff with that. I think that was the playbook last year, and I'm not sure that's actually going to continue because I think we're going to see a lot more moving to the hosted platforms.
To bring it back to the question, then
In terms of
currently,
the vibes, it's very, very smart, but it's very hard to get that smart out of it. You really have to know what you're doing. It takes a lot of experimentation. Gemini 2.5, I find, works really well out of the box, and GPT-5 takes a lot of work to get it
mm,
right. But when it does work right, it is really good. But one of the problems with it is when you're building an application, there's a lot of, there's a lot of other concerns beyond just how good is it or how smart is it. It's how quick is it and how much does it cost. And with GPT-5, I find it to be very slow. We find it to be very, very slow. But more importantly than that, it has very wide variance of how long it takes, because sometimes it will be able to respond very quickly, and sometimes it
because
has to do a
it
lot
hot
of
swaps between
internal
the thinking,
thinking.
right?
Yeah, so sometimes you'll be doing something, it'll be like 10 seconds per call, and then suddenly 2 minutes. And you're like, what just happened? And you don't have much visibility into that. So I'm hoping that that's something that these model companies will work on, is giving us even more control and visibility into what's going on under the hood.
Before we jumped onto this GPT-5 versus Gemini, we were talking around like internally the tooling that you're building. Is it probably that you'll build out a local model, an internal model that you'll end up using
Yeah,
long term? Is
I
that the
don't know.
route? Is that the route that potentially will play? Or you're just not sure
I
yet?
think that used to be the route. I don't I honestly I don't know. I think the most important thing will always be context engineering. And
Hmm.
the reason is it doesn't matter how good the model gets. If you're more efficient and more precise with how you give it context, because you have to remember every call to an LLM is a completely new new state of the world for that LLM. Whatever you give it is whatever it gets. And so the better you are at that, the better results you're going to get. And so that's really what we focus on. And so when I say tooling, it's all the tooling we have to help us build out our context engineering functionality much better. In terms of local models, I don't know ultimately. I don't think so. That's my gut feeling at the moment.
The capital that you've just raised, what's that going to be
Mhm.
deployed into? Like, where is the focus right now?
Primarily, I mean, the capital, I mean, especially at this stage of a startup, but as an application, I think the vast majority will be going on technology staff. These are people that are going to help us build the product out. We have 2 people starting this month. We're hoping to have another 3 or so by the end of the year, and that's primarily where it goes. We're not spending all our money on. This is the benefit of focusing on the context engineering too, and riding the wave of the model company work, is that it doesn't require massive upfront capex. We spend, let's say 5 figures on tokens during our R&D process, rather than 7 figures on GPUs, which is what you had to do 2 years ago.
And can I ask then, like, long term, you end up competing with a product like Adobe when it comes to their website platform and Adobe AEM. And we've talked offline about this. I don't think that the software engineers internally could build out what you're building. And is the goal long term to basically compete with that or open up a completely new category of what we can call website?
We see it completely as a new category. I think we do. I think naturally we do compete both with those tools, but also with your Wixes, your Webflows, your Framers, all of those things. I think people will still want to just build a web page how they want it. That's not going away. Um, but yeah, we really see it as a completely new paradigm for a new medium on the web, and we talk about it like the jump from print or no print to print, and then from print to the internet, right? We had these big shifts in how we present information and whatnot. And we think this, like, AI and agentic AI is providing that next or the technology necessary for that next paradigm shift.
Your co founders that you've met in the US and obviously you're building this generational product with, why were you guys the right team?
Why we were the right team? I mean, like it's funny. We weren't actually building this when we started, and
Hmm.
we ended up coming round into this product after a few iterations. It's one of those standard things that happens at early stage. And
Yep.
it's funny. It turns out that what Ted, our CEO, a lot of what he spent his early career doing was optimizing websites and building landing pages for advertising campaigns and optimizing them and running experiments for ad campaigns. And so he has a massive amount of in the trenches experience of doing this, and he's seen what works and what doesn't. And particularly in that space, what you generally find is it's not always what you think is going to work is actually what works. It has to be very data driven, because oftentimes it's not the prettiest website that converts the best. It's often around the messaging or the placement of CTAs and whatnot. And in terms of Chris, our COO, I mean, he is just a monster deal maker, salesperson. He's got experience across many different fields in that regard. And I think we're a very well placed team to do this.
Are you building the company out of Europe right now, or is it sort of a blend between the Valley and the UK at the moment?
We've flipped back and forth on this. Like I mean, the three of us are based in London. Two of us are British. The two new people we have starting in September. One is in London. One is in Hamburg, but they're going to be in London a lot. We are speaking to people in the Bay, but we really want to be based out of London initially. And but I think San Francisco long term is still ultimately where software service businesses, software as a service businesses get built. There's a whole lot of reasons for that, and I don't want to dive too deep into the whole Europe versus US argument. But what I will say is the European market is not one unified market, and I know you've got Andreas on next, so I'm sure you're going to talk about this a bunch with him. But Europe is not one unified market when it comes to software, the same way that it might be for more things in the atoms world. And so I think long term we see ourselves as multi-headed, both in San Francisco and in London. I mean, we see the technology and product building talent in London is outstanding, and it's underutilized. I don't think there's enough good companies in London to really saturate the amount of talent that's here.
I've got to ask you one question before I let you go, right? We absolutely have to bring you and the rest of the team on down the line. I'm looking forward to it. Our good friend Harry, I was asking him about, like, I've got Luke on the show. What have I got to ask him? And he goes, ask him about his childhood a little bit. Ask him about Blackpool and being brought up there and then getting into startups and technology. Dude, explain, how does a kid from Blackpool end up quite literally moving to the Valley to build something, bringing that knowledge back to the Europe and the UK and going, we're going to build a generational defining product?
That's funny, and I know Harry's listening, so he'll probably be laughing right now. I think it's a combination of a few things, tenacity, but good fortune too. But I do think you make your own luck in these things, and I was very fortunate that when I before I got the job at Zilch, which was my first like London startup job, I got that remotely during the pandemic. I was supposed to be joining the Royal Air Force, and that was my way out of Blackpool. That ended up getting cancelled because of COVID, and I was very fortunate that a recruiter just messaged me on LinkedIn. Zilch were hiring like mad. I got on a call with them. I did the interview. I got on another call. The head of engineering at the time, Kai's, I think he took a liking to me. Sadly, he's passed away now, but he took a liking to me and decided to take a chance on me. I wasn't paid a massive amount. I think that was a risk. Now I think from the perspective of being a hiring manager, I think that was a risk on their part. But I was very, very fortunate for them to take that risk on me. But you have to maximize serendipity. I think, like, especially nowadays, there's no barrier really to being involved in what goes on in London or in the Bay Area. From wherever you are, you can meet people who just even through like Twitter. I mean, or X has been a great place of serendipity for me. I've been joined new communities through that, and met people who are now very important to me through that. And you just got to maximize that serendipity.
We're going to let you go, keep building something great. I mean, you may not have done your service to the country through the Royal Air Force, but I think you're doing your service to the world through software. We're going to let you crack on, Luke. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for the time, my friend.
All right, brilliant. Thank you very much. Take
Ciao.
care.
Bye.